to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm excited to have on my show today Scott MacDonald. Hey, Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, it's been exciting preparing for this. I've done some homework and read a couple books. I know we'll talk about that. And most importantly, we might talk about somebody named Sadie and the significance of that. So you're down in San Diego area. I love that part of the world. I'm up here in Vancouver, British Columbia. So Scott, this show is all about you. So I turn it to you and tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, Tom, I've been working primarily in corporate real estate for my whole career, which spans about 50 years. I've lived in cities around the world, actually, and throughout the United States, typically brought in by private equity investors to fix broken companies. And so I've done a lot of corporate restructuring and tried to save companies that were in trouble. And then I tried to retire a few times, and I'm kind of semi-retired right now, spending time writing books, setting up scholarships for needy kids going to school, and doing a little bit of consulting.
Well, that's awesome. That's one of the reasons why I asked you to come on the show, Scott. And you know what? You're very humble, and we're honored to know your bio. I'm just going to add a couple things to that, and then we'll get into your story. I mean, you talked about being a turnaround guy. Unless people know how that work is done, it's very challenging work. I believe that somebody like you puts your career on the line, takes on a lot of risk, a lot of stress when you step into companies that are faltering. Not only that, but you've managed to sustain success, so turn them around and be successful. So we're honored to learn from you today. The other thing is, you talked about being an author. I've got in front of me here in the studio a couple of really cool books. The first one, I know we'll get into this, is called Think Like a Dog, How Dogs Teach Us to Be Happy in Life and Successful at Work. And you co-authored that book with Sadie, your rescue dog. And I know Sadie's asleep on the couch over there. This is probably the first show I'll ever do where I have a dog on as a guest. And the second book, which I was really intrigued by, was Saving Investa, how an ex-factory worker helped save one of Australia's iconic companies. I think that's where I learned about the depth of your work. So congratulations on all that work. Why don't we just get into your story, Scott? Take us back as far as you want and tell us about how you've journeyed through life.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, and I worked my way through school. I went to Indiana University, and in those days, going to college in the United States was very inexpensive, and you could make pretty good wages working in a factory. So those days are gone. You can't do that anymore, but fortunately I was able to do that, and got a graduate degree, and then went to work and was in real estate for, as I said, a long time, and lived in, I think, 17 different cities through the course of my career. Then the Investa project, there's a company in Australia, a very large company called Investa Property Group, and I was asked by private equity investors to move to Australia and take over the company and save it. And I wrote a book about it. It was the first time I ever wrote a book. Usually my life has been busy with work and with family, but I did write a book, and it got very positive reviews, and it's been used in universities as case study on corporate turnarounds, and that started a little bit of a writing career. And then I subsequently wrote a book about life of a dog, which was a fun book, and that's the one that's out now. And then the third book, which is not out now, but it'll come out in a year, is about the crisis with student debt in the United States and the inability of kids to afford college and what that means. So I've kind of transitioned, but late in life I have been focusing on writing more than restructuring real estate deals.
That's pretty amazing. I made a note here on my page about the third book. I can't wait for that one to come out, Scott. I have a daughter who's 21 years old and in fourth year university up here in Canada. I know a lot of people who came out of university and certainly have significant student debt. So that'll be a great read, a great teaching tool. I made some notes here, and so just going to capture what I heard you say. I mean, there you were, and you navigated through your early years, growing up in Chicago, going to university, graduate degree, and then you got on this track as a turnaround CEO, present CEO type. 17 cities. The course of your career spans across those cities and different companies. One of the things that stood out for me when I read the book Saving Invest, and everybody, I recommend that you get both Scott's books. I'm just going to read a passage off the back here that stopped me in my tracks and made me look further. I think this gives insight into your experience here. On the back of the book, it says, it was 6 p.m. on June 4th, about a week after meeting with the bank. It was my birthday, but I was in no mood to celebrate. Ming Long, Jonathan Callahan, and I sat in an Investa conference room. We stared at the silent telephone. Our $650 million loan matured the next day. I asked Jonathan exactly what time the loan payment was due. After checking the loan document, he told me 11 a.m. No one had ever asked him at precisely what time of day a loan matured. Without an extension, we were finished. So close and yet so far. I mean, that was an incredible moment, but I want to dig back into your lifeline and talk about some of the things I learned about you in that book. And I honor you for being transparent and vulnerable. I think that's a great leadership trait. I mean, your early part in life wasn't easy. You navigated through an interesting childhood. Along the way, you had some health challenges. I think I read about an injury you had, maybe some relationship changes. Tell us about some of that, Scott, and then how did you navigate through those challenges to take on the work you did and be successful?
Well, my father died when I was 6 years old, so that was kind of the first memorable event. I had a heart attack, and I was raised by a single mom, and for a lot of reasons, she wound up drinking too much, and it was to get away from other issues in her life, which I later learned about. So I was raised by a single mom who had alcohol issues, and that was one burden to overcome. And I think when you overcome challenges, you get stronger and you get less distracted as you go through life. And I credit the ability to survive and deal with that. During the Vietnam era, I went into the U.S. Marine Corps and I blew out my knee in training. And I still have issues with the knee many, many years later, but I managed to build it up enough to go back and resume school, and then I had a good long run. I was married for 30 years, have two wonderful kids. I'm very close to them, was very involved in raising them. And then after 30 years, my wife just decided she didn't want to be married anymore, and so she filed for divorce. And that's just another hurdle. So when you go through life, you have challenges and you have hurdles, and you have to somehow get through that process. And it's not easy, and it's not easy for any of us. I think everybody has challenges and issues and hurdles and obstacles, and you just have to keep at it. Yeah, early in my life, I met a guy, and I remember this well, even though it was many, many years ago. And I asked him what he did, and he said, "I'm a wall pusher." And I said, "I don't really know what a wall pusher does, so why don't you tell me?" And he said, "Young man, when you go through life, you will find that there's always, as you try to make progress, there's always a wall keeping you from moving ahead. And there's a guy on the other side of the wall pushing back. So when you try to push the wall out of the way, someone's always there pushing back. And you got to just keep pushing. You have to have persistence. You can't give up. And eventually the guy on the other side will go away, get tired, get bored, whatever, go away. And you'll push that out of the way, and then you'll come to another wall. So to be successful in life, you need to be a wall pusher. And I thought, that's a pretty interesting story. And that has stuck with me for over 40 years.
Well, I can see by the turnaround work that you do with faltering companies, how that one, and that's such a nugget, a teaching moment on today's show, that one thing served you well. You know, I wanted just to honor you, and I got to tell you that my heart was growing, just like that show, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, when his heart grew 3 times at his chest as you're telling your story. And I honor you, and we're so proud of your vulnerability about the challenges. I mean, it really puts it in perspective. You know, there's some parallels. They say we're all connected by threads in our stories, Scott. And a lot of times we see high profile executives, you know, presidents, chairmen, CEOs like you, and people look at those folks and say, wow, they're icons. But what we really don't think about is what's behind those stories. We're just all the same. I mean, my dad passed away a year ago from a heart attack. My father was a violent man. He was an alcoholic. And it wasn't until later in life when I sat down with my dad, which actually only happened a few months before he died unexpectedly. And I said, Dad, tell me your story. And I learned about his pain and how he grew up with an alcoholic father and all the things that come with that, that I really was able to find in my heart understanding and forgiveness about why he treated me the way he did. And you said that one thing in your story about your mom, and you know, we say God bless your mom, that for various reasons, you know, she used alcohol for her own means. And it's only until later in life when we find out as adults that story that we can be free of that. So congratulations on pushing those walls and continuing to move forward. Let's switch gears a bit now. And there's something about you that I love, in that you have this humor and this creativity. It's rare in authors to find that trait. You wrote this incredible book called Think Like a Dog. I think it's just coming out. I'm just going to read the postcard that you sent me. It says, how dogs teach us to be happy in life and successful at work. I just want to tell everybody that I just read Scott's book. I posted a 5-star review on Amazon. I think I called it Clever and Inspiring Work. So, Scott, why don't you tell us why you wrote that book and a little bit about that book and your pal Sadie?
Yeah, well, my youngest son was a few years ago was a law student at the University of Texas Law School, and he rescued a dog. This dog was picked up outside a town called Beaumont, Texas. Was living in the wild with his mom. The animal control people that picked her up, thought she was probably around 6 months old, but had never really been socialized around people. Put her in the dog pound. She had a lot of medical issues, probably would have been euthanized, except someone in the local community rescued her and took her into a vet and had some of the medical maladies addressed. And then my son picked her up, and she lived with my son for a couple of years and became socialized to being around people and being in a house. And then what happens with kids, and I think this is a familiar story, when they rescue a dog, then they get a full-time job, and then they call their parents and say, in my case, hey, Dad, you got to take Sadie. I've got a full-time job now, and I can't keep her. And so what do? I mean, as a parent, you take the dog. I didn't want the dog, but I took the dog. And then this dog was still a little scared and skittish and obviously pretty smart. The first day she was here, I walked her to the beach. It's about a mile. It's down a couple of dirt paths. It's across a bridge. It's across a very busy street. It's hard to get there. And I took her off the leash when we got down to the beach. There's a dog beach area. But I was with friends and their dogs, and I figured their dogs would teach Sadie kind of how to behave. Instead, she turned and ran away. And she had been in this town for less than a day. So I go back to the house thinking I've lost Roz's dog, and there's a dog waiting at the door. So the dog has somehow figured out from walking one time a mile to a beach how to get back home to where Ross was. So smart dog, but very antisocial. And then over time, the dog just evolved and took over the house, took over the neighborhood, knows all the neighbors, knows all the people who walk their dogs on the beach, knows how to get treats. And I thought, how did this happen? how does this dog go from being so afraid of everything that moves to being in charge, to getting her way? And I began to take notes, and I finally just put it in the form of a book. The other thing I'll say, it dawned on me one day. If I go back a number of years, I was doing some work in China, and I took some time out and did a tour of the Forbidden City there in Beijing, where the emperor lived. I think the last emperor was about 500 years ago.
Yeah.
And I asked the tour guide, I said, so there's no indoor plumbing in this place. When the emperor went to the bathroom, where'd he go? They said, oh, the servant would show up with a chamber pot, and the emperor would use it, and the servant would disappear. And so, oh, okay, not a great job, but I understand. So fast forward 10 years, I'm walking the dog, Sadie, or Sadie's walking me. She poops. I pull out the bag. I clean up after the dog. And it dawns on me. At what point did the dog become the emperor and the human became the servant? Because that's exactly what was going on. So that got me thinking about, well, maybe there's more lessons to be learned from this dog than I thought.
Yeah, I have to say it was a really heartwarming story. I just want to plug it a bit more here. It's worthy of this. So if you give me a few minutes, I want to tell you that, as I read the book, Scott, and the listeners, when you read it, it starts out each chapter with a story through the eyes of Sadie. And it's a remarkable reflection when you're listening or reading a dog telling a story. And there was a few ones that I just laughed at. One was Sadie telling us how, after dogs take a poop, they scratch. And Sadie said, at one time she said, I think I scratched and I threw a piece of poop up at Scott and he was mad at me or something like that. And I just smiled because, you live through the eyes of the dog and you realize they're really humans in these four little feet. So I really love the book. I want to read this off the bio again related to it. It says, the amazing graphics and cartoons by nationally acclaimed artist Marty Bucella, I hope I said that right, are worth the price of the book alone. It is virtually impossible not to smile or laugh in the many depictions of dogs and people. In the book, each chapter has one of these graphics. And then what I also love that you did, Scott, is at the end, there's 3 takeaways, 3 lessons learned, which are really applicable. The last thing I want to just say about this particular book is that you're giving some funds from the book itself to scholarships, your MacDonald scholarship program. You might want to tell us a bit more about that as well. But I want to ask you, when I turn it back to you now, I want to ask you about one of the biggest lessons you learned from Sadie that you wrote about that can be applied in leadership and in life.
Well, there's a lot of lessons there, Tom, but one, I've always been a guy that is focused on the future. Where are we going? How are we getting there? How to best position myself, my kids, my family, to meet the challenges of the future. But if you look at modern psychology, there's a lot of discussion about living in the present, living in the moment, being aware of the situation at that time. Buddha, back 2,500 years ago, wrote, don't dwell on the past, don't worry about the future, focus on the present, because the present is where things happen. So that's a concept which clearly is part of being a dog. Dogs don't think about what happened 2 years ago, and they don't worry about what could go wrong next year. They are very focused on the present, on connecting to people, their master, their owner, on connecting with other dogs and other people, and focusing on the present, which is now consistent with a lot of modern psychology. So that's a lesson learned. Even though it's important to be aware of what may happen in the future, don't lose sight of the present. Don't lose the opportunity to take advantage, to connect, to enjoy your kids as they're growing up, and to bond and take advantage in a good way of what's available in the present, because the present will lead to the future, and you shouldn't ignore it. So that's kind of a lesson that I picked up from Sadie, and then as I did research, understood that it's a pretty important human quality as well.
Yeah, you really got my heart on that one. I've been an advocate, Scott, for over a decade for marginalized people or mental health, and my vision is to make the world a better place through mental health wellness. And you nailed it. I mean, that's one of the things that people struggle with when they have depression or anxiety. It's about not living in the moment. I'm going to be vulnerable and suggest that through my lifeline, I've struggled with a little bit of that myself. So certainly love what you said there. I want to read this one small passage that came to mind. You've written, "Today we have more shallow connections with others. Our communications are expanding horizontally but shrinking vertically. We're trading quality for quantity and real for virtual. Is anyone really communicating anymore? Could thinking differently be the key to better relationships?" I think that's what this book really is all about. It's thinking differently. So we want to say thank you to Sadie, who's on the couch there, for being the co-author behind this book with you. One of the things I want to do is just throw out something at you and ask you a question around it. There's a study that was done. It was a Canadian study, Scott, and they asked 90-year-olds, and I know you're not anywhere near that yet, but they said, what are your 3 top regrets at age 90? And, the 3 top regrets were: 1, didn't reflect enough; 2, didn't take enough risk; 3, didn't create a big enough legacy. I mean, here you are, an author, a turnaround executive. You're doing some consulting. You're semi-retired. What, at this point in your life, is there something yet that you still have on your bucket list to do?
Oh yeah, I have a pretty full bucket list. I don't know when I'm going to slow down. Someday I will have to slow down. But my current passion is making university affordable to kids from poor families. And I started this a number of years ago. I was running a company in Texas and sold the company and made some good money. And I've always felt that you need to give back. People helped me when I was young and broke, and I had student aid, and as I said, college was cheap, so I didn't need much. But I set up scholarships at a little school in North Carolina where my kids wound up going to school. Davidson College is kind of a thank you. Yeah. And the students get a scholarship. They get money. They all have to be eligible for financial aid, meaning that they don't have enough money to go without financial aid. But they have to pay it forward. They have to go do community service work and help other people who are disadvantaged. And the program has worked out really well. So when I moved back from Australia a few years ago, I took the program and the results, and I went to other universities, Indiana University, where I did my undergraduate, and University of North Carolina, where I did my graduate work, and set up programs there where, again, kids get money, so they don't have the debt, and they're able to go to school, but then they have to pay it forward. They have to go out and help people who are also disadvantaged. And it's just been a really good program. It now operates at 5 universities. There are over 40 scholars funded.
Wow.
And so that's my passion. And when I say in the book that, proceeds from the book will be used for scholarships, they will be. We'll keep plugging.
That's amazing, Scott. I mean, talk about servant leadership. They say those who can infuse their work with their passion live happier, fulfilled lives. I mean, you're an example of that. We're so proud of you and what you're doing there. I want to read to you a few words I've written down here, Scott. These aren't scripted. As I listen to you, I write them down. These are leadership words. I want to honor you with them before we move to wrapping up. The first one is creativity. Man, you're a creative guy. 2 is wisdom. 3 is resilience, and I guess we could put beside that wall pusher. 4 is empathy. It comes out of you. I read it in your book that you're a man who knows how to connect to people in a deep way. Showing empathy as a CEO leader is very hard for some. and then servant to others through the work you're doing. Talk about leaving a legacy with that scholarship program. It's pretty amazing. Why don't you tell us, Scott, how people can get a hold of you and your body of work?
Yeah, I have a website. I have a few websites, but the main website is authorscottmacdonald.com, and it's M-A-C, not M-C. In the U.S., everyone wants to spell my name M-C because of the burger place.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I guess I have no relationship whatsoever with the burger place, but it's authorscottmacdonald.com, and there are links to the scholarship program, and there are links to some other things. My sister-in-law, my brother's widow, writes a column on living in a small town in Iowa, small town life, and you can access that there too, and it's kind of a fun site.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, thank you for that, Scott. Everybody, find this show on iTunes and give it a high rating so we can honor Scott's work. Check out his website. I highly recommend getting both books, Think Like a Dog, it's out now, and Saving Investa, many lessons in business and life in that book as well. I'm a big fan of yours, Scott, and I think there's probably another show I want to do with you and have you come back and really talk about how you turn around a company that's faltering. I'm sure we can learn more from you on that. But I'd like to thank you again for being on the show. It's been an honor.
Well, thanks, Tom. And if I can, I would like to tell your listeners that the book you wrote, I think, is really a stellar book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior. And if you haven't read that, it gives pretty good outline as to how to improve your life and your business in a kind of a organized fashion, much more organized than I am in terms of giving advice on that. So I salute you too. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the praise. I'm humbled and blessed with that. So everybody, find the true passion like you heard Scott did. Find that life that you deserve and desire and live with that purpose. And listen again to the Quiet Warrior Show. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca